as of just now. Om Agyana Tamarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Prijna Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This is Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 2, contents of the Gita summarized, text 26 to 36. Atachainam nitya jatam nityam va manyase mritam tatapi tvam mahabaho nainam shochitum arhasi. If, however, you think that the soul is perpetually born and always dies, still you have no reason to lament, O mighty armed. Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityor dhruvam janma mritasya cha tasmadapari harye rite natvam shochitum arhasi. For one who has taken his birth, death is certain, and for one who is dead, birth is certain. Therefore, in the unavoidable discharge of your duty, you should not lament. Avyakta dini bhutani, vyakta madhyani bharata, avyakta nidhananyeva, tatra ka paridevana. All created beings are unmanifest in their beginning, manifest in their interim state, and unmanifest again when they are annihilated. So what need is there for lamentation? Ascharyavat pashyat Ascharyavat pashyati kashchidenam Ascharyavat vadati tataiva chanyaha Ascharyavat chainamanya shrinoti shrutav Shrutvapyenam Veda na chaiva kaschit. Some look on the soul as amazing, some describe him as amazing, and some hear of him as amazing, while others, even after hearing about him, cannot understand him at all. Dehi nityam avadyoyam dehe sarvasya bharata tasmat sarvani bhutani natvam shochitum arhasi. O descendant of Bharata, he who dwells in the body is eternal and can never be slain. Therefore, you need not grieve for any creature. Swadharmam api cha viksha navikam pitum arhasi dharmyadi yudak treyo nyat kshatriyasya navidyate. Considering your specific duty as a kshatriya, you should know that there is no better engagement for you than fighting on religious principles, and so there is no need for hesitation. Yadrichaya kopapanam svargadaram apavritam sukina kshatriya partha labante yudam idrisham. O Partha, happy are the kshatriyas to whom such fighting opportunities come unsought, opening for them the doors to the heavenly planets. Ata chitvam imam dharmyam sangramam na karishyasi tatasvadharmam kirtim cha hitva papam avapsyasi. If, however, you do not fight this religious war, then you will certainly incur sins for neglecting your duties and thus lose your reputation as a fighter. Akirtim chapi bhutani katyasyanti te vyayam sambhavitasya chakirtir maranad atirichate. People will always speak of your infamy, and for one who has been honored, dishonor is worse than death. Vayadranam uparatam mamsyante tvam maharata yesham chat tvam bahumato bhutva yasyasi lagavam. The great generals who have highly esteemed your name and fame will think that you have left the battlefield out of fear only, and thus they will consider you a coward. Avachya vadamscha bahun vidishyanti tavahita nindantas tava samartyam tato dukataram nukim. Your enemies will describe you in many unkind words and scorn your ability. What could be more painful for you? Text 26. If, however, you think that the soul is perpetually born and always dies, still you have no reason to lament. Almighty armed, purport. There is always a class of philosophers, almost akin to the Buddhist, who do not believe in a separate existence of the soul beyond the body. When Lord Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita, it appears that such philosophers existed, and they were known as the Lokayatikas or Vaibhashikas. These philosophers maintain that life symptoms or soul takes place at a certain mature condition of material combination. The modern material scientist and materialist philosophers also think similarly. According to them, the body is a combination of physical elements, and at a certain stage, the life symptoms develop by interaction of the physical and chemical elements. The science of anthropology is based on this philosophy. Currently, many pseudo-religions, now becoming fashionable in America, are also adhering to this philosophy, as well as the nihilistic non-devotional Buddhist sects. So this idea is there in modern society that life is coming from chemicals. We seek knowledge from some sort of authority. If we want to learn something about the body or about the world around us or how life is happening or anything, even in art, we go to some teacher. And so the curriculum that's being taught in all of these schools and by all of the people who we see as the highest sources of knowledge in society today, which is mostly scientists, doctors, professors, big thinkers. These educators and leaders have explained that life begins from a combination of chemicals. So there's some chemicals and they mix together, and somehow or other, eventually some life happens. Maybe an amoeba happens, and then that amoeba might turn into eventually some small organism, and then a fish, and then that fish comes onto the land and becomes a lizard, and like this. But this theory that life is coming from chemicals, what proof is there to support it? If we look at when someone dies, if it's simply chemicals that are making consciousness, this person who has likes, desires, emotions, memories, plans, all of these things, if all of that, what constitute a person, is just chemicals, then when that personhood or whatever, when that consciousness leaves the body, when someone dies, then the scientist or person who's saying everything's coming from chemicals could just take those chemicals that are missing and put them back in that body, and the person would be back. But we don't see that happening. Or if now someone might say, well, if someone is deficient in calcium and therefore they died, or there wasn't enough H2O in the body and then they died, if someone comes and puts that whatever deficient thing was missing in the body, then they'll come back or whatever. I personally haven't seen that, but we do know for a fact that once it's someone's time to go, there's no amount of money, no amount of doctors or anything that can give them a second longer to live. If someone has to die, then they may ask their doctor, I'll pay you my whole life savings if you just give me one more second to live. Srila Prabhupada gives this example that he saw some rich man and he was speaking to his doctor that I have so many plans and I haven't fulfilled them yet. If I'll pay you however much money you want, but just give me a few more days. The doctor said, I cannot. There's nothing I can do. You have this illness or whatever, the body's going, it's deteriorating and you're going to die. There's nothing I can do. So there's something beyond just chemicals that's making the body have symptoms of consciousness and be alive. If it was just chemicals that are making life, then we could ask the people who are propounding this theory, make some life. Just get a test tube and some chemicals in a nice lab and create an ant or a bumblebee or some small form of life. Something even smaller than that. Just make a bed bug, but they can't, no one's done any of these things. No one's created life in a laboratory by combining chemicals. So one devotee went to some sort of convention where the scientist was propounding this idea, saying that we figured it all out. Life is coming from chemicals. Here's the chemicals that make up life. Here's how it works. So then the devotee just asked this question that, okay, you're saying these chemicals on your presentation make life. If I bring all those chemicals and supply them, can you make life? Can you make a chicken egg or something very simple like that? And the scientists replied that in time I can do it. And so they scheduled a date where the scientist would then make life based on his theory that he proposed, that these chemicals are making life. And when that date finally came, he didn't show up. So these are false claims. It's cheating. It's a cheating process. Just to say, I have made this theory, there's no evidence to support it, and it is correct. And then put it in all the textbooks, pay for it to be the main theory. So like this, it's a cheating process, and these things are just keeping people in illusion. Instead of leaders who give real knowledge to the people of the world, we have cheaters who give all sorts of lies to the people of the world and continue to exploit them. So this is the type of knowledge that we're dealing with in the world today. And this is the idea with this kind of philosophy that life is coming from chemicals. We can see it's not coming from chemicals, but I don't know what that noise was. It's not coming from chemicals, but there's actually something different from matter that's causing life, and that is the soul. And Krishna explains that, and actually many of the scriptures in the Vedas explain that that soul is Keshagra Shatabhagasya. It's Balagrasya. It's 1/10,000th the size of the tip of the hair. If you take the tip of one hair and divide it into 10,000 pieces, you'll get to about the size of the soul. It can't be cut. It can't be damaged by anything material, withered by the wind, or any of this. So that's the soul. And what is that soul? It's a part and parcel of the Supreme Soul, or Krishna. So life is coming from the Supreme Living Being, Krishna, who's expanding into millions and unlimited numbers of living entities. So that's what is presented in the Vedic literature. And the alternative is that life is just coming from matter. It's just chemicals, which doesn't hold up for so many reasons. Even if Arjuna did not believe in the existence of the soul, as in the Vaibhashika philosophy, there would still have been no cause for lamentation. No one laments for the loss of a certain bulk of chemicals and stops discharging his prescribed duty. On the other hand, in modern science and scientific warfare, So many tons of chemicals are wasted for achieving victory over the enemy. According to Vaibhashika philosophy, the so-called soul or Atma vanishes along with the deterioration of the body. So in any case, oh, I might have to, sorry, I have to click on something on the live stream. So in any case, whether Arjuna accepted the Vedic conclusion that there is an atomic soul, or whether he did not believe in the existence of the soul, he had no reason to lament. According to this theory, since there are so many living entities generating out of matter every moment, and so many of them are being vanquished every moment, there is no need to grieve for such an incidence. However, since he was not risking rebirth of the soul, Arjuna had no reason to be afraid of being affected with sinful reactions due to his killing his grandfather and teacher. But at the same time, Krishna sarcastically addressed Arjuna as Mahabahu, mighty armed, because he at least did not accept the theory of the Vaibhashikas, which leaves aside the Vedic wisdom. As a Kshatriya, Arjuna belonged to the Vedic culture, and it behooved him to continue to follow its principles. So Krishna is saying, if however you think that the soul is perpetually born and always dies, still you have no reason to lament, O mighty armed. So Krishna is explaining to Arjuna that Arjuna should surrender unto him and do as Krishna desires. He wants Arjuna to fight. So the whole Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is explaining to Arjuna why he should, there's many different factors, but he's bringing Arjuna, Krishna is bringing Arjuna to the stage of pure devotional service, which is just engaging in activity under Krishna's direction, just doing what Krishna wants for the sake of Krishna's pleasure and not any personal motive. So he's saying to Arjuna here that there's these different ways of convincing him that he should fight anyways. So let's see them from the beginning. Oh yeah, so the first thing he's saying is that the soul doesn't die. You had a boy body, then you had a child body, then a youthhood body, then a man's body. So you've been changing bodies this whole time. So naturally, one can conclude that you'll continue changing bodies. You're the soul, the body's changing, but you're still the same person. And we can understand that factually if I used to have a baby body. It was about this big, small baby body. Now I've got a totally different body. I've changed bodies, but I'm the same person. Now someone might say you're not the same person. You have different awareness in the way you act is different. So yeah, the awareness may have changed. The mind may have also changed, but it's still my mind and my awareness. I'm still the same person. If someone had a picture of me as a baby and then they were looking at me now and they're saying, that's not the same person. That's a different person. But if you showed my mother that picture of me as a baby and were pointing at me saying, look, this is not him. He's several feet taller. He looks nothing like that, this and that. She would say, no, that's him. That's my boy. So we know we're the same person, the same soul, but the body's changed. So similarly, the body will keep changing, but we will still remain as the same eternal soul. Krishna explains that the soul never comes into being and it never goes away. For the soul, there is neither birth nor death, nor having once been does he ever cease to be. He's unborn, eternal, ever existing, undying, and primeval. And then, so here he's convincing Arjuna, he is not slain when the body is slain. So he's giving Arjuna different reasons that he should do his duty. So here we see this reason according to our modern philosophy today that life is coming from chemicals. If you think the soul is perpetually born and always dies, someone is born and die, and that's the person, just the body. The body is the person. It's born and it dies. You still have no reason to lament, O mighty armed, because he's saying, just like Prabhupada gave the example, no one laments for a loss of a bulk of chemicals. If there's some ship carrying sodium chloride or some sort of chemical, and it all falls into the ocean. No one causes a big fit about it. Sure, they'll be a little disappointed, but no one laments for this loss of chemicals. So if you believe that life is simply just chemicals, these bodies, persons are just some random assortment of chemicals that are firing off for some time, and then when those stop, there's no more person, then still, Arjuna, you have no reason to lament in your duty of killing these people on the battlefield if you think everything is just chemicals. Because what are you changing? You're just, some chemicals are getting destroyed, like the ones falling off the ship into the ocean. Some chemicals are remaining. What's the big deal? So let's see his next reasoning, which of course we know that isn't the case. People are persons. A person is spiritual. They're inside a material body filled with chemicals and things. For one who has taken his birth, death is certain. And for one who is dead, birth is certain. Therefore, in the unavoidable discharge of your duty, you should not lament. Purport. One has to take birth according to one's activities of life. And after finishing one term of activities, one has to die to take birth for the next. In this way, the cycle of birth and death is revolving, one after another without liberation. The cycle of birth and death does not, however, support unnecessary murder, slaughter, and war. So Krishna makes this point in the Bhagavad Gita, yam yam vapi smaran bhavam. Whatever the mind is fixed on at the time of death, that's the state that one will attain without fail. So the soul is seated in these different types of subtle air within the body. And so the first covering of the soul is the false ego. And so now we're talking about matter, but not something that you can see, but subtle matter. So false ego is also made of matter. So the false ego is the misidentification of myself with the material energy. Krishna explains there's 3 different kinds of energy. There's the superior energy, the spiritual energy. And then there's the marginal energy. That's the living entities. They can go either way, into the spiritual energy or into the material energy. And then there's the material energy, his inferior energy. So when us in this marginal position, when we become confused and identify with this material world and this material body, that's the false ego. So that's the first covering of the soul, is this idea that I'm this body and everything in relation to the body is mine. And then after the false ego, there's the intelligence. So that's how we figure out what to do, how to do things in the world. And the next covering is the mind. And see, we're getting a little less and less subtle. Like the face is the index of the mind. You can tell you can understand someone's mind just by looking at their face. So it's a little bit less subtle now. The mind is what's deciding what's good and what's bad. This will be good for me, that'll be bad for me. And then the intelligence decides how to go about doing that activity. So then after that, there's all the gross material coverings, earth, water, fire, air, ether, and all of this. So those subtle things, though, the mind, intelligence, and the false ego, those are what carry, that subtle body is what carries the soul to the next gross material body. Whatever one is thinking of. So if one spends their life eating undiscriminately, just always wondering, how can I eat more and more and more, whatever it is, all these nasty fast food things that are so filthy, all these restaurants that are also dirty, and who knows who's cooking it and where their consciousness is at. And now that's in the food that I'm eating. So if someone's always going after food, then they're this subtle body of always looking for things to eat and how can I eat everything, it'll just put them in, bring them by the arrangement of nature, who's ultimately sanctioned by Krishna, but by nature brings them to the next material body of a hog, and then they can eat anything that they like. Or someone wants to surf all day and they're always thinking of the water and swimming and how they can ride on the waves more, and then they're thinking about that they have that attachment still at the time of death, and they're born as a fish. or someone just wants, anyway. So it's based on their desire and also what they're deserving. So there's 8,400,000 species of life, and they're like different apartments. So based on what you can pay, you can rent the different type of apartment, and you're in it for some time. But if someone was to go and rent an apartment and spend all of their time doing decorations and adjusting it, they shouldn't even be adjusting it because they have a certain lease on the apartment with its terms and things. But so they're spending all this time putting up new things, rearranging it, all this work on the temporary rented apartment. It would be a waste of time because then once the lease is up, they have to leave and get a new place. And they just spent however many years fully focusing on changing this apartment and arranging it, but there's no permanent benefit. So like that, we're renting this apartment of the human body. So we should use it for its real purpose, which is to understand who we are, who is God, and how can I please him? How can I serve him? How can I develop my love for God? So that's what we can understand in this human form of life. And Krishna is showing us how. But at the same time, violence and war are inevitable factors in a human society for keeping law and order. The Battle of Kurukshetra, being the will of the Supreme, was an inevitable event, and the fight for the right cause is the duty of a Kshatriya. Why should he be afraid of or aggrieved at the death of his relatives, since he was discharging his proper duty? He did not deserve to break the law, thereby becoming subjected to the reactions of sinful acts, of which he was so afraid. By avoiding the discharge of his proper duty, he would not be able to stop the death of his relatives, and he would be degraded due to his selection of the wrong path of action. So by engaging in service to Krishna, in Krishna consciousness, and doing our particular duties that the Lord wants us to do, and we can know them by Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. We can know what does Krishna want me to do by what he says in Shastra. He gives it there. So, and then we can also confirm it with sadhus, the saintly persons who are practicing, following what the Lord wants, and the guru, the spiritual master, the one who is instructing one in spiritual life and also engaging one in devotional service. So, and initiating one specifically, they initiate the disciple into the chanting of the Maha Mantra and into engaging in devotional service. So by engaging in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, everything is being fulfilled. It's the whole purpose of the living entity in this world to become cured of their material disease. We're rotating in so many different forms of life based on our desires. Why are there so many varieties of life? Because there's so many different material desires of the living entity. So as long as we have these material desires, we can keep taking on different types of body, tree, fish, bird, human being, and keep getting kicked by the material nature. When one does the laws of God, then they suffer punishment by the laws of nature. So, because nature is working under the direction of God or Krishna. So when we become tired of getting kicked around by nature, then we can start make the decision to turn back to our natural position of serving Krishna instead of trying to dominate the world around us. So the material world, it's more or less like a prison. It's presided over by Durga. That's, you could say, Mother Nature, or Durga, Maya. Durga also means fort. So she's like the warden, keeping all of the living entities in illusion in the material world. So it's like a prison because it's meant for rectification. We keep dying and taking birth again and doing so many activities so that we can learn from them and learn that this place isn't our home. We're not meant to try to be the supreme enjoyer, but we're meant to serve the supreme enjoyer, Krishna. So if we do our proper duty, which is Krishna consciousness, then everything is perfect. All the duties that we have in life and responsibilities are covered by the discharge of devotional service, because now you're serving the person who's at the top of it all. You're serving the CEO of the whole company. So in that way, everything is properly being taken care of. Just like if you have a $1,000 debt, if someone comes and gives you $1 million, you don't need to separately go and endeavor for the $1,000. They give you $1 million and, oh wait, I still gotta, go here and go deliver these newspapers so I can earn up $1,000 to pay the debt. No, that's included in the $1 million that you got. You can pay off that $1,000 debt with that. So if we're engaging in Krishna consciousness, it's perfect because we're going back home, back to Godhead, to the spiritual world, and getting out of this material entanglement of birth, death, old age, and disease. And similarly, we can help anyone who's in contact with us get that benefit as well. And in scriptures, it said that when one becomes a pure devotee of the person who's in charge of this whole thing, then Krishna, then their family, 21 generations backwards and 21 generations forwards, also gets the chance to attain to devotional service. They also get liberation. We see a practical example of this with Dhruva Maharaj, who's a great king. He went and did austerities in the forest at just 5 years old. And his spiritual master, Narada Muni, instructed him how he could see the Supreme Personality of Godhead and ask for a benediction from the Supreme Lord. So he did these austerities because he wanted to get a kingdom greater than the kingdom of his father. But once he finally saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, he said, I've been looking in this forest just for broken pieces of glass, in reference to that kingdom that he wanted. But now that I am seeing you, I've found the most valuable diamond. So when Dhruva Maharaj was eventually, many more things happened in his life. They're very exciting and interesting, and they're in the Srimad Bhagavatam. But as he's getting back on the spiritual airplane to go back to the spiritual world with the spiritual servants of the Supreme Spiritual Person, Krishna, when he's getting back on this ship that will take him to the spiritual world, he says, wait, what about my mother? She's the one who first told me to go and seek out the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So she should go back too. And the servants of Krishna, the Vishnu Dutas, they told him, don't worry, look over there. And he looked, and on another airplane already, he still hasn't even taken off yet, but already his mother's on an airplane in a spiritual form, flying back to the spiritual world. So like this, we don't have to worry about doing any other activity besides Krishna consciousness. It's actually a total waste of time to think that there's something else besides trying to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead that is worth endeavoring for. It's a total waste of time. It doesn't make any sense. And if someone's practicing Krishna consciousness and they themselves start to think, maybe I should do this activity or that activity that isn't directly connected to the service of the Lord, they know inside that this makes no sense at all. It's a waste of my time, and it's putting me in more anxiety. Because if we're engaging in the service of the Lord, then all of our anxieties are becoming squashed. They're becoming relieved because we're going back to the place of no anxiety, Vaikunta. We're under the jurisdiction of the Supreme Person, the only person who can fully satisfy all of our senses and desires and everything just by seeing Krishna. All your desires are, your senses and everything, it's fulfilled. They're satisfied. You just want to see him more. So by serving Krishna, we're going back to his abode, which is known as Vaikunta. Kunta means Vaikunta means no anxieties. So when we're engaging in devotional service, it's blissful because we know I don't have to keep dying and being put in another womb and suffering. So that fear that's always there in everyone in the world that I don't want to die, it starts to go away. Even just in the beginning stage of performing devotional service, that lingering anxiety and fear that's always there that's just ruining every moment, it starts to actually go away, even just in the beginning, just from a glimpse of devotional service, because we're engaging in our real nature, which is that we're not this body actually. We're a spirit soul that's eternal, full of bliss and full of knowledge, and is normally serves the supreme soul. And that's how such a person is actually happy and naturally engaged. So when we're doing devotional service, we're remembering and reawakening that natural position, and we're stopping the identification with this temporary body, which is going to die sooner or later. So the anxiety and the fear and darkness of this world start to go away, even with a glimpse of devotional service. And what to speak of a lifetime of devotional service or a serious commitment and determination to devotional service. So we want to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as Arjuna is being instructed to do here in the Bhagavad Gita, because that's the way that we will be back in our natural position, and that's the best way to be. What's better than that? So we can continue with the purport. Okay. All created beings are unmanifest in their beginning, manifest in their interim state, and unmanifest again when they are annihilated. So what need is there for lamentation? Purport. Accepting that there are two classes of philosophers, one believing in the existence of the soul and the other not believing in the existence of the soul, there is no cause for lamentation in either case. Non-believers in the existence of the soul are called atheists by followers of Vedic wisdom. Yet, even if, for argument's sake, we accept the atheistic theory, there is still no cause for lamentation. Apart from the separate existence of the soul, the material elements remain unmanifested before creation. From this subtle state of unmanifestation comes manifestation, just as from ether, air is generated. From air, fire is generated. From fire, water is generated. And from water, earth becomes manifested. From the earth, many varieties of manifestations take place. Take, for example, a big skyscraper manifested from the earth. When it is dismantled, the manifestation becomes again unmanifested and remains as atoms in the ultimate stage. The law of conservation of energy remains, but in course of time, things are manifested and unmanifested. That is the difference. Then what is the cause for lamentation, either in the stage of manifestation or unmanifestation? Somehow or other, even in the unmanifested stage, things are not lost, both at the beginning and at the end. All elements remain unmanifested, and only in the middle are they manifested. And this does not make any real material difference. And if we accept the Vedic conclusion as stated in Bhagavad Gita, Antavanta ime deha, that these material bodies are perishable in due course of time, nitya syokta sharirinaha, but that soul is eternal, then we must remember always that the body is like a dress. Therefore, why lament for the changing of a dress? The material body has no factual existence in relation to the eternal soul. It is something like a dream. In a dream, we may think of flying in the sky or sitting on a chariot as a king, but when we wake up, we can see that we are neither in the sky nor seated on the chariot. The Vedic wisdom encourages self-realization on the basis of the non-existence of the material body. Therefore, in either case, whether one believes in the existence of the soul or one does not believe in the existence of the soul, there is no cause for lamentation for the loss of the body. Okay, so again, Krishna said, all created beings are unmanifested in their beginning, manifest in their interim state, and unmanifested again when they are annihilated. So what need is there for lamentation? So it's another argument he's presenting to Arjuna on why he should do his duty and stop just grieving for the material bodies. Does anyone on Zoom have a question or comment?
I will say this, that This is Josh, by the way. Um, I do appreciate this class, and there's a lot of important things that you touched on. As far as like reflections, I would probably need some time to uh, think about it, but it's been a good class, and I I want to keep listening, and maybe towards the end, I might have a little more to say, but I am listening.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate you always attentively joining the classes.
Hare Krishna.
There's a nice verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam that describes actually by regular attendance in classes on the Srimad Bhagavatam, all that is inauspicious in the heart is destroyed almost to nil. So all the things that are getting in the way of our progress of life, of our real goal, which is to get out of this material world, get back to who we really are in our relationship to Krishna, is destroyed by regularly hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam. Some look on the soul as amazing. Some describe, and just by hearing about Krishna, Krishna favors the living entity with the, he allows that living entity to hear about him more. He becomes pleased and he engages the living entity in more hearing of him. And so in that way reveals himself more to the devotee. So it's the perfect process. We just go on hearing about Krishna and we become purified. And actually just to speak from, I guess, a personal example, at one point I was having a lot of difficulty. Everything was going wrong because somehow or other I had a lot of weakness of mind, and it seemed I was just falling back into the same types of uh, thought patterns and habits and everything that I was in before, which if you engage in devotional service, you'll realize the way you were before is hellish. So is scary. And so I was in this difficult time, but I just picked up Krishna book. That's Srila Prabhupada's um, book of the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's all of Krishna's pastimes put into one book in such a way that we can actually access it, even though it's the topmost thing. And Prabhupada always makes the statement that one shouldn't jump to the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, but read it from the beginning to end. But this just goes to show even more the wonderful qualities of such a pure devotee as Srila Prabhupada is he's taken that part of the Bhagavatam and put it in such an accessible way that we distribute them even on the street to random people and they read it and become benefited. I actually had a children's version of the Krishna book was one of the first things I read from Srila Prabhupada, and it was very helpful. So anyways, yeah, I was having a lot of difficulty and didn't see how I could progress in spiritual life, and it seemed like I would only go backwards in spiritual life, but I just picked up the Krishna book and just crammed it. I just crammed it. You can dictionary the word cram. It means to study very intensely, specifically for an upcoming exam. So I just crammed the Krishna book for like 6 hours one day, and then 5 hours the next day, and then 4 the next, and then maybe another. So like this, just a bunch of, just as many hours as I could cram in the Krishna book. And it just changed everything. That's the cool thing that I've personally noticed with Krishna consciousness and also with chanting Hare Krishna is it's not that I'm doing something that just changes something internally, which is there, but it's not that I'm doing a meditation that just makes my mind more peaceful or helps me focus more or something like this, just something just relative to me internally. But when you take up the process of Krishna consciousness, I've noticed that specifically in this circumstance where I was reading the Krishna book, or just when I started first chanting 16 rounds of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, everything changes. It's not just that my mind has changed or my health or some, minor thing like this, but everything changes. your life, where you're at, the people that are around you, what they're saying, how much you're able to understand it, what they're talking about. It's a whole nother ball game of stuff people are talking about. It's not just the same 24 elements moved around in different combination this time. Oh, what happened on the ball game? And phew, what happened at the other type of ball game where you hit it with Oh, it's already 5 minutes over. Okay. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna, Josh. Sorry, it disconnected, obviously, but thanks for being here.
It's okay. And the request for camera control was an accident. I was just trying to figure out what was happening.
Thank you for joining.
Thank you.